How you guys doing today? Today we are back at the airport, back onto the projects. Finally have a decent day where the sun's out. It's about 50 degrees, but it is pretty windy. Got a wind going southeast here. But today is project is the fuel system on my Challenger 2. Actually had to do 2 emergency landings, so today's project is going through the fuel system. And my solution is not only replacing all fuel lines, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to install this fuel pump here so that I can flip a switch on during landings and takeoffs, or if I ever have the occurrence where it happens again. It was not fun. It happened twice, and I was very fortunate that I just happened to be over about a mile outside of an airport, which is about 15 miles from this airport here, and was able to safely land at that airport. And that airport actually was Woodbine Municipal Airport, and the runway has not been used or maintained for quite some time, and it is a grass runway with quite a bit of ruts. I'm sure they have all kinds of moles, but it was a rough landing, but I'll take a rough landing over a field or even not landing at all. So I am grateful and thankful, and all glory and honor to Jesus Christ, and for allowing me to have a safe landing. Upon inspecting the plane, what was happening is these fuel lines, I was able to look back and see that the fuel lines here were actually air bubbles when it started to occur. So I knew that there's either not getting fuel or it was just pumping air. So right when that immediately happened, after I landed on the ground there, the engine never did stall completely. It just bogged down completely. It would only make about 900 RPMs, which is not even idle, with full throttle wide open. I was afraid to back it off because I didn't want to lose any kind of propulsion that I needed just to maybe help me get up over some trees and to make a safe landing. Upon landing, I left it running, and I could see the air bubbles started to go away out of the line. At that time, you know, I did a ground run up, and it let me run it up, idle it up, and everything seemed to be fine, no issue. So I went ahead and shut off the engine, pulled the bowls down, double checked them, made sure there's no debris or anything in there. The filter that I did have on, everything looked good as far as visual. It was a clear filter, and matter of fact, I think I have I possibly have one of the filters around here. Let me see. Anyways, I might not have brought it, but what it is, it's a clear filter, and I'm pretty sure it's a Fram filter, but it has a paper filter inside of it. And I do not recommend whatsoever to run a paper filter. After inspecting everything, I could not determine what the issue was with the fuel. The fuel lines were good, the bulb was good, there was no leaks. I pulled the lines off and everything was good, and it made no sense to me while I had, you know, I even went ahead and rebuilt this pump here. So this pump here is now all rebuilt with a whole new build kit, and you know, I did a test with the bulb, you know, and make sure that there's no debris in there making that check valve or anything have an issue. Everything was good inside there. It passed all the tests, which really boggled my mind. So then what brought me to my conclusion was I need to open up the fuel filter. So exactly what I did, that filter looks good, and I'll actually be able to post some pictures and stuff once I get this all gathered up together and I get a final conclusion and get everything all fastened up. But yeah, it's a scary deal, but do not use them paper filters. I pulled that filter apart, and what has happened, there's a glue that they use when they glue that filter together, and for whatever reason, and I use premium gas, and it's always fresh gas. Every time I come out to fly, I bring fresh gas. I don't mess around, and if there's anything in there, I'll drain the fuel out. No special additives or nothing like that. I don't pre-mix my fuel and let it sit. I'm pretty adamant about that. So what I came to is I cut that filter open and I was in shock. It looked very clean and clear. As soon as I touched that filter, that paper filter, it was like touching glue. I mean, I could have took that piece of filter and put it in between two pieces of wood and clamped it down, and it probably would have held like Elmer's glue. For whatever reason, defective filter or just a problem, I'm not sure, but I'll never use that paper filter again, or any paper filter for that matter. It completely clogged the filter. So what I did, it allowed me to manually, when I squeezed the bulb on the ground, it let me force fuel past it. It seemed to be fine, but at that time my adrenaline was probably going, so I'm squeezing that prime bulb pretty good. So, and probably didn't realize the resistance that filter probably had. But at that point my adrenaline's going, and I just had emergency landing, so it could have been overlooked there that when I had adrenaline going, I squeezed that bulb. Of course, I'm going to squeeze that bulb with ease. So and that's a failure on my part, that I just didn't think. I pumped the bulb up and wasn't thinking, but it boggled my mind that I had no idea. So what happened was, everything seemed to be fine on the ground. Did a ground check, and I was worried about the rough, airport runway, which I'll post some pictures and stuff and with the video. I was scarce about even taking off on the runway, but what I did is, I just tried to find the best position on the runway, where the best path I could, and so yeah, I took off on the runway, and it was really bumpy, and I had some back pressure and a little bit of flaps to kind of ease the front end, and the nose gear. I didn't want to rip that off or anything. Took flight and stayed in the traffic pattern. I stayed in the traffic pattern for a few minutes, and everything seemed to be good, and I just circled the pattern, and at that point it was approximately 4:15, and so the sun was due to set about 4:45, and at that point from Woodbine to this airport is about a 14-minute flight if you don't have any issues. And I did have a little bit of a headwind, about 7 knots, so that there would probably shave off a couple minutes. Approximately 5 minutes after takeoff, I knew immediately then that I wanted my pattern to be at a little more altitude, just in case there was any issues. So at that time, after taking off, I just continued my climb to approximately 3,000 feet to kind of give me that cushion of comfort. If anything was to happen again, that I'd have time to kind of find a spot to land that would be efficient. So sure enough, about 5 minutes after, during my climb, and I was just at regular RPM. I did run a little higher just because I wanted to create more of a vacuum just in case, and I was eager to get there fast. It started to bog down, and immediately started to want to drop in altitude. So I backed the throttle off to idle, and it still continued to run. I looked back and still could see air bubbles in there, and eased the power up to see if it would go, and at that point I could tell it wanted to completely cut out. So at this time I was trying to find a spot to land, and there's a lot of fields, but there's a lot of power lines and a lot of there's a river, and there isn't really access to certain spots. But I guess that all really should be after fact of thinking. First, you just want to find a good spot to land and to be safe, and recovering the plane, that can be done, and you can't always recover a life. So it's more important just to focus on just getting the plane down to a safe spot. But by the grace of God, I just happened to spot out an area right along the river. My first intentions was just to land possibly on the levee of the river, but I did find a spot that it looked that it had adequate room for me to land. At this time it was really cutting out, losing power, and I did need a little bit more power to upon my descent and my approach to overcome some trees and a power line. But in this case I had to get it down to the ground fast so that I'd have enough runway for the landing and that I'd be able to come to a complete stop without hitting anything. So at the rate of descent I came down, and I'll send some pictures and videos and stuff of this. It was a pretty steep approach. You know, I had to come up pretty high, but then come down real fast at a pretty good sink rate to be able to get down on the ground in order to stop the airplane before running into a dirt pile that was at the end of the runway, which I'd rather have it be a dirt pile than anything else. But I was able to use the primer. I did install a primer that bypasses, which does not go through the fuel system. I have it direct going into the tank and right to my actual primer up there. So now that I had that, I quickly was thinking, well, maybe if I can manually quickly prime it, and I can be able to feed it some fuel manually with my thing, that it would give me enough power, if needed to be, to land. And in fact, I did need more power. But every time I would push that primer, it was like riding a Bronco. As soon as I primed that in, it accelerated, wanted to lift up, drop, lift up, drop, lift up, drop. So it was very tricky to maintain level flight and safely maneuver and keeping my airspeed up, that I didn't stall on the approach when I had to make a hard left bank to swoop down into the runway. But by the grace of God, it all worked out perfectly. I was able to prime it just enough to give me enough power to clear the obstacles and bring it down to the runway. Brought it back down to the runway and landed with about approximately 8 feet left of runway before I would have ran into a big dirt pile. And so it was just a blessing that it just worked out the way it did. And the location was definitely rougher than the airport, and it was not very level, and some soft spots and some mud spots and tall grass. So I really didn't know what the runway was like, and what I should have done, I should have walked it before taking off again. But I did follow my tracks of coming in, and I was able to prime up the filter. Everything was good. I'm back again. Sorry about that. I had to get a drink. I had something in my throat, yeah. So before taking off, I did the initial check and looked at the fuel filter again. Looked at everything, and at that time, by the time I got out of the plane, I could see that the lines were already charged up. There's no air bubbles whatsoever. So it was really just puzzling me what was going on. All I know at that point is that I was really running out of daylight, and at that point I was just about approximately 4 minutes from my runway flight time. So I assumed that, you know, if everything's good, there's nothing leaking, my temperatures and everything were good. I mean, really, my exhaust temperature was about 1,000. My cylinder head temps were actually pretty low. They're about 250, which is pretty good. So I knew that as far as everything going on with the engine, everything was seemed to be fine. So at that point, I was questioning the air filters, which I have cleaned. I pulled off a filter, and I was able to see light through it and blow through it, and that wasn't it. You know, I was just trying to go through everything just to kind of see. And I was just puzzled. You know, I just wanted to double check and not overlook something. There could be something maybe in there just clogging it, or, you know, the plunger or something sticking, but everything was good. So I did squeeze the prime bulb and had pressure there, so everything was good. I had fuel in the line, so I attempted and to maximize the runway that I could, and just you know, said another prayer, just, you know, just asking to get home safe, and really that's important. You know, it's about prayer. You know, and he hears you, he's there, and I don't know if you guys are believers, but I'll tell you what, something like this would make a believer out of somebody, and I just knew that you know, he was just faithful and grateful just to protect us. And so with that said, you know, I was just eager to get home. You know, I did make a phone call. I did talk with my wife, and I talked with my friend Richard, and you know, he flies as well, and I actually purchased the plane from him, and he got me into flying the Challengers, and I just explained where I was at and my location, and I was being tracked too as well. I had GPS and on my phone, and so I just let him know exactly what's going on. That way, you know, if in case something happened, you know, it's important that people know that that you're out flying or something, because I mean, that could have happened, and I could have been not fortunate and just ended up in a field somewhere. And the weather forecast for the following day was to be 50 to 60 mile an hour winds with a blizzard storm. So that's another thing. I wanted to get the plane, you know, back to the hangar as well, and but that really shouldn't have been my priority. My priority should just been, you know, being wise about it. And I was confident that I would have enough power once again after doing a run-up test to be able to get me up into a good altitude and able to safely make it back to the airport. So I went ahead and used all the runway I could, and used all my flaperons all the way down just to create more lift. And immediately, as soon as I became airborne, I immediately cranked the flaperons up to increase my airspeed to make sure that I'd have enough speed on the ground that I could have a good climb out to clear some trees. At that time, it was you know, approximately about 4:30, and normally the sun around here was at that time was about setting that time, but for amazing blessing that the sun was still up, and really based off of the time and the time that the sunset was called to be, I actually had about 45 minutes more of sun, and it was just another blessing, just to know that the simple things like that, you know, is a blessing. So about a mile outside of the airport, same thing. Started to bog down, lost power. At that time, I was pretty confident that I would make it to the runway, but I did have a headwind, about 7 knots, so, and a crosswind on the landing. So it was actually a direct crosswind on the landing, so it was important that I'd have enough power upon the approach to maintain, you know, a good descent. And so I came in for the landing, and it, you know, at that point, you know, I just backed it down to idle. I had enough altitude above the airport that I was able to go in the pattern on my final, and with my rate of descent, it kept my airspeed and everything up at idle, which was really good, even with that headwind. Was able to get it down on the ground smoothly, safely, and by the grace of God, without any injuries and no accidents, and immediately at that time I was just more thankful and grateful just to be on the ground. And it took me about 10 minutes to get out of the plane, you know, just sitting there just giving thanks to the Lord for getting me through it. So that brings me here today. Finally, it's been about 3 days, bad weather, and I was determined to get out here and check it out. And so this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to install this fuel pump and all the new fuel filter, and double check. At this time I'm going to do a complete inspection, and I think it'll be wise. But thanks for tuning in, and definitely do a pre-flight inspection, and the paper filters, do not use them of any kind. I did find this one here that's bipolar, and it does have a mesh filter inside, so I'm going to give that a shot and see how it works, and I'll let you guys all know if it works good for me. But thank you, and God bless, and I hope you guys are all flying safe, and you just have a blessed day. I'll be back with you guys later. Alright, we're back here now. I did complete the installation of the fuel pump, and I replaced all the fuel lines. All new fuel lines here, make sure everything's good. That's the pump I went ahead and installed. It's a 12-volt pump, and best place I could find to mount it was right there on this plastic cover here. And I did go ahead and use some lock nuts so it stays fastened, so I don't have to worry about it loosening. And not only that, I did go with some rubber washers. That way it kind of takes and absorbs some of the shock and kind of keeps it kind of stable. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and fire it up, make sure that everything else looks good. so far I got all the wiring done. Ran it through here, and had a plate in there where I just easily did the ground, and then I ran a power wire all the way forward underneath the seat and along the fuselage. So it's getting dark. It took quite a while. I want to take my time. Sun's already set there. But yeah, so I'm going to see if I can fire up and make sure that we got good fuel pressure and no air in the lines. And I did install the pump right here. Sorry about the lighting. It's right here underneath my primer, so I got my primer and then I got the switch. Yep, I can hear it kick on, so that's good. So I can prime it. And this is really going to be used for emergency situations, probably takeoff and landings, just to have the extra power. I think it's good to have, but I'm going to run without it a little bit and make sure that everything else is running without the pump, and if so, that's amazing and a blessing. So I got it all primed up. I'm going to go ahead and start it up. Let's see. I don't even need this on here, but yeah, if you kind of see, I've done a little bit of staying in the pattern. Quite a bit actually, but that's good though. Honestly, about 90% of that time that I've been here just around the airport was practicing for emergency procedures and emergency landings, and just getting very efficient with the plane and all different weathers and different winds. You know, it is important to be able to practice. You know, a lot of pilots will only practice, you know, when they have fair weather. Well, weather changes, and a lot of times what happens, it'd be a nice, calm, beautiful day, no wind, very light, and then what happens is you get up there, you're flying around, whether you go, you know, for half a day, a few hours, and weather changes. You know, you got the warm front come in, you know, thermals, and there's so many factors, but you know, what are you going to do when you get back to your airport and realize that you have a crosswind that you have never practiced for or have never flown in at your airport, you know, your comfort zone. So it's very important that you stay familiar and understand how your airplane, you know, functions in different weather conditions. I'm not saying to go out and fly in bad weather, but I am saying to be prepared. It's good to know, as being a pilot, that you're able to do them crosswind landings, and you know, it's not a shock when you get down to the runway, then all of a sudden it wants you, sends you off the runway into your hangars. So it's very important just to practice for safety, and just because weather changes and, you know, nothing's certain. So it's important just to know and just be efficient in your plane. That way you're confident and comfortable, because if you're not confident, you're not comfortable, you're going to be nervous. Nerves go, and we make mistakes when we're nervous. So it's important to be calm, collected, and just be trained up in your plane, and always stay refreshed, you know, because a lot of times we have different weather. Like now, I mean, we got weather here where we got 2-3 foot drifts, and a lot of it's melted off, where it'll be, you know, a blizzard one day and then up to 60 degrees the next day. So it's just very important just to stay efficient. So I'm going to go ahead and check this all out, and I'm going to fire it up and see how it handles. All right, I'll go ahead here. All right, clear prop. Oh, beautiful. Nice and smooth idle, no sputtering, very smooth. RPMs, wow, it's only about 1800 RPMs, but it is a cold start, so I imagine once it warms up, it'll actually be idle right there around the 2000 range. But yeah, that's with the pump off, so far everything's good. I don't see anything bubbling the lines. Very smooth. Do a mag check. I'll go ahead and idle it up. Nice and smooth idle. Very little drop between the right and the left. No drop at all, so that's good. That's very important as well. So there we are. Everything working proper, and yes, and hopefully I'll never have to experience that. But honestly, no joke, the day before this happened, I was up flying and didn't have much time. I got here late, and the wind didn't calm down till about 4, and so I had about a half hour of efficient sunlight, and so the only thing I did, I stayed in the pattern, and I practiced emergency landings. I'd take off and climb, and then I'd kill the power, and it's hard to prepare for something like that unless you practice for something like that, and that's exactly what I did the day before. I practiced that if I was to have an engine stall on takeoff and an engine stall, on approach. It's all important just to practice it and to know how to respond and what to do. And I was just thinking to myself, and I told my wife, I was like, imagine that the day before I was practicing. The Lord kind of sets us up in some ways. Sometimes He gives us little hints and stuff, and sometimes we need to listen and be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, because sometimes He's trying to tell us something, and maybe He was telling me not to fly, or maybe He was just telling me just be ready for what's about to come. And I do believe that that the Lord was just preparing me, and making me efficient at what I was doing, and it was on my heart that day just to practice emergency landings, and that's what I did the whole half hour I had, and I just practiced swooping in, landing, and I did the same pattern I had to do, no joke, the exact same pattern I had to do when I came in for that emergency landing, up over some trees, and a hard left turn, and able to keep it from stalling, and that's exactly what I did. And I'll actually post that video, because I did record that emergency landing practice, and it was the day before. So glory be to God that I just was efficient, and I practiced that, and I knew how the plane would kind of handle. But when it becomes a real situation, I mean, it changes. When I know that I killed the throttle, that's a big difference, other than having a failure for fuel loss and fuel starvation. That's a big difference. So I just say, it's very important to be prayed up, be efficient, read lots of literature, get online, and there's lots of forums, and just be like a sponge. I mean, never be too wise. And once we think we're wise, we done fooled ourselves, because we are always able to learn something, and it's a learning curve, and it's very important. So yes, thank you for just watching, and I appreciate it, and yeah, so safe flying, and if you guys have any questions or anything, I'll leave some contact information on there, and I'd love to hear some stories and talk about planes and everything. But for now, for this week, this was my project. It kind of sidetracked me. I have two Cessna 150s that it's just been a blessing, amazing how it works, and I'll tell you guys all about that. And I purchased one and from a gentleman that who just actually had a 97th birthday, and World War II veteran, and amazing guy, and wow, he has some stories. And unfortunately, just found out a couple weeks ago that he has cancer, and it's spread, and he's very comfortable, he knows the Lord, and so that gives me comfort. But he's at peace, I'm sure he's in lots of pain, but he still comes out here much as he can. His nephew John, who is faithful there to just to go through this with him, and bring him out here on Sundays, and just let him even sit at the airport at his hangar. But I was able to purchase a 150 from him, and it needed quite a bit of work. It's been sitting, and there was some water and stuff damage, but I was able to so far I got it up and running, replaced a lot of things, but I'll go over that, and that'll be a whole nother series. But for now, I just want to thank you, and God bless, and be safe, and just look over your airplanes, make sure your fuel, everything's good, and glory be to God. It's all about Him, and we're not promised today. Today's a day of salvation, so I just pray that you all know Him or have that relationship, because really, with flying aside, all this aside, that's really the only thing that's important that matters. Other than that, this is just a blessing that He allows us to do with His time. And so thank you, and God bless, and hope you all have a good day. And like I said, just stay tuned. I'll have plenty more of footage and of off-the-wall random adventures, and I just want to thank you. Thank you and God bless.